I discovered cheating wife having an affair an old classmate through security cameras. The low quiet drone of the quadcopter was drowned out by the children's squeals of pleasure. At Lily's 12th birthday, the parents of Lily's 5 visiting friends had dropped them there earlier, and all 6 girls were now playing in our backyard, waiting for the cake and ice cream to be ready. I began thinking about it. What about our backyard? Yes, this was our backyard until our divorce was finalized around 2 months ago. Now it was only my backyard. Except that it also belonged to my 14-year-old son Alex, who sat on the patio feigning indifference. My daughter Emma 11. Well 12. As of now, as a result, we have a birthday. Wow. My darling princess is only a year out of her teens. God assist me. We made it through Alex's transition. That's all for now. Now I need to figure out how to help Lily traverse this minefield on the road to womanhood without advice or assistance. Crap. It's Lily's big day. Her last childhood birthday before entering the dramatic, opulent and agonizing period of puberty. I had already resolved a few days before that I would not let Lily's mother's thoughts about my ex-wife Bella dominate the joy of the day. Instead, I'll focus on providing Lily a great experience, while also preparing for the fun I'm planning with my friend and now partner in our exciting and potential business, Oliver Ross and Careful Days. I muttered to Oliver as I maneuvered our remote-controlled aerial platforms with the tablet controllers we all had. Do not reset too early. They may flee, preventing us from experiencing the full effect. Just make sure to fly the other drone low over the back fence and turn on lights at the appropriate times. My Indian-American acquaintance. When everyone is distracted from the real threat. The bombs are ready. He had almost completely lost his sing-song subcontinental speaking rhythm during his 6 years in the United States. In fact, spending 4 of those 6 years in Tennessee softened his English accent, allowing him to incorporate terms like y'all into his everyday vocabulary. He would sometimes joke with me that in Knoxville, he learned that y'all was singular and all y'all was plural. 6 girls at a birthday party were now roaming around the lawn, staring up at the quadcopter flying over them. It created a low hum, moved briefly in one direction and then hovered again. The females watched him and walked beneath him. He proceeded again in the opposite direction for approximately 20 meters, and the girls followed. The Enola Gay, a spherical item with ribbons flowing around it, was suspended beneath the quadcopter, which was moving around 8 meters above them. We informed the girls that it was an air pinata that would drop small sweets on them at the appropriate time, while we kept the other quadcopter, which Dis and I called Ben, out of sight. I was the one with genuine power over it, and I disabled it for a while. He waited silently in a tiny area in the woods near our backyard fence. I set down my tablet controller to reach the Budweiser Black Crown bottle. I've been drinking this beer more frequently lately because I felt the need for a little extra booze following the tragic events of my divorce. But I wasn't going to drink today, because I still had to drive. I simply enjoyed the taste. Therefore I only bought 2 bottles. I coughed, choking on the temporary diversion of her beauty. I knew Lily had asked Bella, my ex-wife, to her party, but it still bothered me to see her walk out onto the terrace as if she owned the place. Still an arrogant queen, ruling anyone and everyone who entered her area of bad influence. She astonished me, because I didn't see her automobile arrive. I had to cough a few times to rid my airway of the stray beer that had gotten in there. While she distracted me for a single second, Bella still looked decent, but not as spectacular as she had been a few months before. Her shoulder-length blonde hair, emerald eyes and stunning form could always cause the action to slow, if not stop entirely. She was still extremely lovely recently, but she had gained some weight, which I'm sure she didn't enjoy. Her status as the most attractive lady in sight, which she had held for the most of her life, since the age of 15, was now in danger of evaporating. When she placed the wrapped gift on the table set aside for Lily's gifts, she gazed straight at me without displaying any emotion. Her expression immediately changed, from fleeting happiness to complete lack of feeling, then to a brief moment of grief, followed by an evident desire to face the situation with determination. She sighed audibly, attempting to greet with a pleasant grin. "Chris," she murmured, stepping towards me. "Bella." I limited myself to responding by turning to our daughter and her pals. I attempted to relieve the stress in my body caused by her sheer presence, with varying degrees of success. She could still excite me, but not in the same way. I checked my watch and realized that time may slip away if I wasn't careful. I sat down the bottle of beer and took up the tablet. "Controller, it is timed," as I said to my friend, who was standing a few feet away from me, holding his own controller and concentrating on the Enola gaze controls. I couldn't tell if he knew Bella was present. I knew that aside from a small dislike for her presence, he wouldn't mind. "Okay," he responded simply, nodding as he moved the Elena closer to the back of the yard and the fence. I took my tablet controller and pressed a button that triggered remotely. I couldn't hear anything start up behind the fence, but I did notice the system status indicator on my tablet, which told me that everything was fine, as they say in nature. While the girls were distracted by the Elena, I took up the alien and hoisted it high enough to clear the trees leading to our yard. In the lower left corner of the tablet screen, there was a built-in window that let me see what the alien was seeing through a little camera, which transmitted the image wirelessly to my controller via a different set of on-screen controls. I was able to move the camera remotely, allowing the field of vision to spin 360 degrees around the diamond and zoom in and out. But today, there was no particular reason for this. Furthermore, the tablet controller's built-in remote recording functionality is unnecessary. The girls were so concentrated on Enola Gay that they didn't notice how fast it was dropping when it cleared the final trees on the way to our fence. I heard Bella next to me take a deep intake in astonishment at seeing it. She was ready to issue a warning when I hissed at her. Not a sound. I didn't look at her, but I could tell she was angry. Before we started our divorce proceedings, I never allowed myself to be nasty to her, and she wasn't used to attending a reception. I'm not sure if it was the firmness in my voice or her quick fury that caused her to exhale rather than yell a caution to the girls and ruin the surprise. All I know is that she elected to remain mute for her own reasons, while I remotely pointed the it over the fence, bringing it closer to where the girls were standing, but out of their line of sight. I swiftly pressed the 2 dots on the control panel to activate the appropriate features to carry out the surprise. 2 very brilliant flashing red and green strobe lights began to flicker alternately as they hovered at a safe altitude just over the tallest female in the group. A split second later the sound effect went off, and a loud signal imitated a police car siren. The female shrieked and turned in unison, only to see two flashing strobe lights immediately above and behind them. In their state of paralysis, I heard these words: "Bombs ready," and looked up from his iPad to see Enola Gay releasing around an object with ribbons hanging beneath it. The thing descended only a meter, when there was an explosion from within, followed by a little pop and the object disintegrated, fading above the girls' heads. The ribbons dropped gently around them in a matter of seconds after being lightly sprayed with water from a cone-shaped bottle of pressurized CO2 that exploded inside the ball. As the Elena made its way back to the patio lands, I noticed a string with the remains of a fuse dangling beneath it. No fuse component separated or hurt the girls. Papa shouted, partially furious, partially humorous. He turned to Dis and me and laughed at them. I knew she was largely reacting to the fear of the unexpected incident Dis and I had planned. The water spray was insufficient to damage their clothes or, God forbid, their haircuts. He began stomping over to where I was standing, with Bella expressing her disapproval. I heard Bella next to me make a coughing sound. Turning to gaze at her for a while, I noticed her eyes were wide open and her lips slightly open. She was obviously astonished. But there was something else. This became clear as she turned to me with fury and disgust. "It was you, bastard," she said in a low whisper. She then approached me and spanked me hard. It's a good thing I didn't touch the tablet controller screen when I backed up from her punch. Otherwise I may have shattered the AITA or collided with one of the girls, because it was just hanging in place. She calmed herself little and continued. "You know, you can be a really cool son of a bitch sometimes without having the gift of a witty comeback or the ability to come up with quick one-liners." I startled myself by answering so soon. "You're referring to not always being a cool bitch." Bella's face became hot, and she stood motionless, pondering repeating the hit from a minute ago. But when did she approach me and put her arm around my waist? At that point, Bella calmed herself little and crouched in front of Lily, bringing her face level with our kid. "Happy birthday, my beloved." She extended her hand to touch Lily's shoulder, and my daughter let go enough to walk up to her mother and wrap her arm around her waist. Bella, although she did not appear to be very comfortable with this public display of affection, she had never been a fan of public demonstrations of affection, especially with me. Nonetheless, I hugged Lily and told him that I'm scared I won't be able to stay. "I just came to give you a gift and tell you I love you. Of course I want to wish you a happy birthday." Bella seemed nice enough, but she looked at me with venom. I didn't care. And it didn't matter whether she knew what was causing her recent tragedies. I just picked up the bottle of beer and took a sip before setting it on the table. I then tapped the tablet controller screen twice before pressing it again to turn off the rotary motor. Bella turned and started walking away. "When did you let her leave and come back to stand next to me?" I believe she has already reached the age where it is inappropriate to embrace her father around the waist in front of her friends, who are standing nearby and watching everything that happens. Emily emerged from the back door of the home just as Bella reached the patio, calling out, "Who wants cake and ice cream?" The girls all dashed to the picnic table, where paper plates and plastic utensils were spread out, while Sandy set out the cake. Catching sight of one another, Bella and Sandy merely exchanged glances for a time. Donna then glanced at me again, nodded, shook her head and gave me the middle finger. Seemingly unconcerned that her daughter and friends would see it. And approached the car, which was apparently parked in front. No. Sandy and I were not a couple or anything. This isn't one of those scenarios in which the misled guy is surrounded by women. Sandy was a single mother for Virginia. My kid was his dearest buddy. Sandy got pregnant but never married. She offered to assist me because I was preoccupied with party planning. Sandy has visited our house several times over the last 3 years, either to drop off or pick up Ginny, or to provide parental supervision. At one of Lily's girls' parties, to which Ginny was invited, Sandy naturally knew more facts than I would have liked regarding my marriage's turmoil and eventual breakup over the last year, due to her close relationship with my kid. After Bella went, the girls Sandy and I shared cake and ice cream. This was followed by the opening of gifts and the distribution of handfuls of little chocolates, which the girls had felt robbed about earlier, following the event, with the false pinata and its wet surprise. Diz and I briefly described and showed the girls the Elena, while flying 2 drones about the property. A fact. The most appropriate term these days is unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, as the name drone has fallen out of favor. Civil rights advocates are protesting the government's use of military and police drones, at home as well as against nominal American citizens battling terrorists overseas. Although the Federal Aviation Administration was still delaying the certification and licensing of commercial UAVs until 2015 or later, these and I still conducted all of the basic research and testing that we could afford. We often fly to the United States at low altitudes and on private land nearby to ensure we are at the forefront of commercial enterprise. When FAA limitations are abolished, we undoubtedly broke a lot of rules in whatever we did. But we convinced ourselves that we could go on as long as we were literally under the radar. We also received overseas contracts and monetary advances to produce copies, and even more advanced versions. And Elena obtained visas for cousins in India. The 2 brothers had already planned to launch UAV deliveries. They are not regulated by Indian laws, which have only recently been publicly acknowledged in the United States by officials from Amazon, and Domino's Pizza. These Indian entrepreneurs considered themselves as business leaders in Southeast Asia when it came to the usage of UAS for remote sensing. Commercial aerial film production was also a profitable endeavor. Add to these efforts the obstacles of oil and gas exploration and mountain rescue. We discussed the possibilities for enormous money. I was surprised by the size of the down payment and the promise of even bigger rewards in the future. After all of this, and I've been doing it since. He finished his master's thesis last year, while interning in the UAE research program. The FAA ultimately permitted extensive UAV research at only 3: Texas A&M University, Virginia Tech, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Samir was enrolled in the program at USF when he began renting a room from us. This worked hard to complete his graduation requirements, while spy interning at UAF test sites near Pendleton and Telemark. He approached us at a time when Bella and I desperately needed extra income for a short period of time. So we decided to rent out a portion of the house. Samir was the first to respond to the advertisement, and while Bella was initially hesitant to rent to a foreigner on a study visa, She ultimately agreed. Samir moved in the week following our first meeting. My home was in Woodland, Washington, just outside and north of Vancouver, on the Columbia River. This put us approximately 3 hours from Pendleton and 2 hours from Tillamook. These were only required to travel to the testing sites. During testing, he spent the rest of his time completing his postgraduate studies via distance, learning from my home. But after the divorce, I allowed him to live there for free. Although Samir's name was Oliver, everyone called him that and he didn't seem to mind. Daisy is a Sanskrit term that refers to the people, cultures and products of the Indian subcontinent, also known as South Asia. It wasn't long before he was known as Samir or Diz. The first time someone called him Diz, he paused for about 5 seconds before smiling and accepting it, realizing that his acceptance of the nickname coincided with his acceptance as a member of our circle of friends and acquaintances. Before the divorce, I had a quiet talk with Samir. After he informed me about the impending cash tsunami in the commercial UAV market, I was already experiencing issues with my then-wife Bella, particularly over economics. She and I had very different perspectives on spending, saving, investing, and planning for our financial future. So I quietly contacted my lawyer to assist me in concealing my investment in UAV research and development, which Samir was now conducting for his cousins, after being released from a non-disclosure agreement connected to his undergraduate internship. I was glad that the conditions of my divorce allowed Bella to complete the arrangements of my business with Samir and his relatives. This meant that whatever profit I might have gained from my new firm was excluded from the divorce agreement and out of Bella's reach. Once Lily's birthday celebration ended, we escorted one of Lily's friends home. Now we were driving home with Lily in the back seat. Dylan was in front of me, nodding and occasionally murmuring words as he listened to music on his smartphone and headphones. Dad, Alex inquired, tapping the phone screen to pause the music. What does Elvis Presley mean when he says no such zone? It took me a few seconds to get my mind off Lily's birthday, Bella's brief visit and tantrum, and the consequences of taking Lily's pal home. And suddenly I understood exactly what Alex meant. You mean from that old song, Return to Sender? I asked. He nodded as I continued. Your grandfather Taylor, my father, should have told me this when I asked him years ago. He claimed that when he was a youngster, Elvis was still alive, youthful, and at the height of his musical success. In the United States, the Postal Service had not yet introduced postal codes. Most cities in America had only one post office. This was unnecessary. However, huge cities like Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles had multiple post offices, and the city was split into distribution zones based on the location of these postal facilities. I watched him nod and glance out the windshield, as if he understood. Then he questioned me. What does it mean when Elvis says he wrote a letter to Special D? I said, nowadays when you send a letter or package with special handling instructions, the U.S. the Postal Service classifies it as certified mail, return receipt requested by priority mail, expedited mail, or something comparable. Prior to the introduction of these classifications, any special handling instructions or urgent delivery requests were classified as special delivery, or as some people termed it, and as heard in the old Elvis song Special D. Dylan nodded again and resumed listening to his music. I looked in the back mirror and noticed Lily dozing off after the excitement of expectation from the night. before as well as the laborious chores of preparing for and hosting her birthday. I could understand that I had to go through all of this with her, as well as all of the drama that came with Bella's appearance. Today I ignored Bella's wrath and gazed fondly at Lily, thinking, my little girl. Yes, my little girl is growing up alongside her brother. My thoughts returned to Dylan's inquiry about an Elvis song he heard on his smartphone's oldies channel while using a music streaming app. I burst out laughing, causing Lily to open her eyes and gaze at me curiously in the rear-view mirror, before returning my attention to the road ahead. I continued to chuckle as I remembered that lyric from the song. Yes, I reflected, recalling the most crucial communication I ever wrote to my ex-wife. I mailed it with special delivery. The wedding happened unexpectedly and without much fanfare. It was only 2 weeks after Bella and I graduated from high school, and a few months after we turned the 18th of April and I in May. Bella was pregnant and everyone blamed me, despite my efforts to persuade my father and her father that she had dated at least 4 other men. While we were dating, my father inquired whether I had had sex with Bella, as I bowed my head to avoid his judgmental glare and nodded. He invoked village justice, an old undocumented and unofficial judicial principle that is still respected in some mountain towns. If the source of the fraudulent check cannot be identified, the final endorser assumes responsibility. 1 week later, I had to kiss the bride. It wasn't too tough, because I had been pining for Bella for over a year and adored her, despite her evident preference for playing on the field during our senior year. Besides, Bella Swinford was a true beauty. In reality, she had been the most attractive female in our senior class. Her feminine curves had been blossoming since she was a sophomore, and she was aware of it. Bella exploited her appearance to her advantage in a variety of ways. While at school she was known as the Queen Bee. At school she won over boys and ruined other girls with her appearance, words and attitude. According to stories, she even seduced certain male teachers in order to receive passing scores. However, this last information was never confirmed, and as far as I know, she never corroborated this with anyone. The remainder of the information was common knowledge. After we were officially married, Bella's father offered to let her stay in the little apartment over his garage while we navigated parenthood, job, and the challenging quest of further education. Bella was overjoyed to be able to care for Alex during the day, despite her mother's dissatisfaction with our living situation. While Bella worked during the day, I attended college and worked many evenings each week. We may not have had the best start as a married couple, but Bella and I developed as a family and learned to appreciate our life together. We even began to have feelings of deep love. As far as I can tell, we suffered financially at first, but with some decent jobs coming our way and a pay boost I obtained after graduating from college with a business degree and getting recruited by a local company, we were able to breathe a little easier. Our sexual experience together was incredible. I've never had such a steady supply of sex as I have now being married. Bella, who enjoyed sex before we married, was ecstatic about our sex life. At least that's how it appeared to me. Less than 2 years later, our sexual activity began to diminish significantly. We still had sex on a regular basis, but I noticed a drop in frequency, which coincided with an increase in Bella's time spent outside the home with work acquaintances, assisting a friend with Mary Kay beauty parties, and participating in a mother's walking group. Only with the final of these 3 tasks, Bella was able to pick up Alex and push him in the stroller we acquired at a second-hand store, along with the other young women and their children in the group. The other 2 activities required me staying at home with my infant, and eventually my toddler boy, or asking Bella's mother for assistance while I was working or studying. In any event, our sexual activity had reached its lowest point since our wedding. Bella approached me one night looking worried. Dylan, who was then 2 years old, was playing with a plush dog at my feet while I studied. When Bella finally spoke, "Darling, please forgive me," she begged quietly, a sad expression on her lips. It took me a bit to take a break from a financial management topic I was working on for one of my classes and respond to her. "Honey, what are you sorry for?" I eventually asked. "Chris, I'm pregnant again." And I looked up surprised and overjoyed. Bella's look indicated that the situation did not offer her much delight. "Darling, this is fantastic news," I said. I got up and went over to hug her. She didn't get up immediately. Instead, I was forced to grab her by the shoulders and bring her up for a hug and kiss. Her enthusiasm may have been modest when we first kissed, but she ultimately kissed me back. I attempted to tell her how happy I was to be a parent. Again, Dylan turned up to be a delightful boy who had not yet experienced the traumatic 2 years that we had heard about from acquaintances. Emma joined our family approximately 9 months after that occasion. Let me tell you, this tiny kid has won my heart. From the minute the doctor cut the umbilical cord, cleaned, wrapped, and handed her over to me, I was officially a member of the Soft Daddies Club, being a parent to a daughter. And I had no idea at the time. The next day, as Emma was learning to breastfeed, I mentioned to Bella that the baby must have gone to her family because her earlobes did not match those of the Taylor family. Bella breathed sharply and burst into tears. As soon as I said this, sweetheart, I was surprised and questioned. What happened? Bella gathered herself together and gave me an odd look. Then she smiled sadly through her tears and, "Glenn, honey, I'm just exhausted from giving birth. And my mind and body are unsettled from the medications and all of my hormones. Attempting to return to Oliver, I suppose. Please forgive me for all of these emotions." She kept looking at me oddly for a time. Then I couldn't understand what was going on. But then something seemed odd about what she was saying. But I decided to trust her story because of my love for her and our children, as well as my own enthusiasm. "Bella, I know it's been difficult. Rest tonight and plan to return home tomorrow. Mama Swinford has prepared everything in the nursery and is looking forward to welcoming us all home, particularly tiny Emma." I smiled at her with all the affection I could muster at the moment. Bella gave me a smile and a raised eyebrow, one of her nonverbal indications for inviting a kiss. I agreed, and we both laughed at Emma's tiny burp between us. Denoted the pipes after Emma was born, claiming that 2 children were enough for her. We spoke about it, and while I wasn't in favor of closing all options for growing our family, I eventually agreed with her. 11 years passed, almost exactly, when I discovered that we had been living alive for a long time. As I previously stated, once I received my degree and a solid job, we began to experience the financial pressure we had been facing up. Until that point, we still had debt, but it was manageable. Banks like to categorize debt into good and bad debt. We quickly attained that balance of good and bad debt, which, combined with recent changes in banking legislation, qualified us for a low-interest mortgage. We also found a little, but comfortable house for a reasonable price, because the bank wants to profit from the property taken during the divorce. Everyone was thrilled with the bank because they were now making money from ad property. Bella and I had our own place, and Mom and Dad, Swinford, had finally gotten us out of their flat over the garage. Okay, Mom. Swinford was dissatisfied since she no longer saw Alex and Lily as frequently as she had before. When I entered kindergarten, Bella persuaded me with some trepidation to allow her to return to work during the day, while the kids were in school. She assured me that this would not have a significant impact on our family time spent with the children or time with me. She kept the commitment. Dylan was about to start high school in the Vancouver region. Grandpa Taylor had to deal with the pain of losing Grandma Taylor a few times. Later, he invited my father and myself to his home. Tom told my father, "I know you and Ruth love where you are and don't want to move. As a result, I'd like you to consider selling this house to Glenn as a one-generation pass. The house is in terrific shape and completely paid for." I expected my father to object to his own father for abandoning him in this regard, but he seemed fine with it. He and Mom, though not wealthy, were financially stable. I was still startled, so I inquired, "Grandpa, do you want to stay here? Among the memories of Grandma and you together, son." Grandpa Taylor responded with a sorrowful smile, "That's why I need to leave. Here, these memories are so wonderful that I'm sad she's no longer here to talk about them with me. No. I want you to have this home for your young family. And I'm going to steal an ancient motorhome from a communal parking lot and visit some place in the Northwest that I've never seen before. I was too old for it. So Bella and I, along with our 2 children, moved into my grandfather Taylor's home in Woodland, north of Vancouver. When the new deed was registered, Grandpa Taylor insisted on it being in my name solely. He hadn't realized it at the time, but now I'm pleased he did. It rendered the house somewhat divorce-proof. If he hadn't done this, I would have had a much more difficult time fighting for and winning custody in our divorce proceedings. Dees had been renting a room from us for around 8 months when he moved in last year. When I saw a shift in his behavior, he weakened in the weeks after his initial visit to us. Bella and I were able to effortlessly engage him in discussion. Following that, he shown great patience in dealing with Alex's almost continual stream of queries. I saw a difference in disease behavior, but I assumed he was attempting to resolve a technical issue with the US system we were testing. Yes, I answered. We, the company I worked for in Vancouver, handled large-scale catering operations for multiple airlines based at Portland International Airport in Oregon. PDX was located immediately over the Columbia River from Vancouver, Washington, only 13 miles away on Highways 14 and 205. Each day our caterers, cooks, packers and transporters created, packaged, and transported specialized airline meals to PDX, tailored for the flight deck of large aircraft, serving in-flight meals. We take pride in offering high-quality cooked meals at an affordable price. The fixed base operations coordinator at PDX concurred with this judgment when he extended our contract annually. As a result, our business was extremely prosperous. Some gains were dispersed as periodic bonuses rather than salary. As a department manager, I received some rather generous bonuses. As I previously stated, I knew early in our marriage that Bella and I had different Perspectives on financial management. To keep my bonus money from becoming an obvious source of cash flowing out of my home, I took several precautions. I found a consulting team consisting of 2 brothers. One of them was a finance professional and the other an attorney. They assisted me in developing my investment portfolio, while also offering tax and legal guidance as part of their services. When these cousins made their offer via email and later Skype, I got convinced that investing in their business could be extremely profitable, and I was willing to take the chance. What I didn't want to do was share any financial rewards with Bella, as this was when I discovered her secret existence. My investment team assisted me in concealing this financial idea from Bella and managing my time until the divorce settlement was settled. Why did I hide this from my wife rather than incorporate it into our family budget? You're asking. Well, because I finally persuaded Dis to tell me what was upsetting him. Chris responded cautiously. Did you know that I tested the camera support during the first wave of tracking and maintaining position? When I nodded, still not understanding his concern, he said, well, the software stabilizing feature now allows me to follow a moving object. In addition, these maintain the GPS feature and the longer-lasting motor on the web allow me to keep it above the ground for up to 4 hours. The tablet controller's video recording feature allows you to record video for an extended period of time, but the device's latency plays a role in this. I knew that wildlife management professionals valued these features because they allowed them to monitor herds of bison, caribou and elk. And the new quieter rotary engines we installed did not make enough noise to frighten the subjects being observed. Environmentalists are satisfied with noise. They then began to delve into technicalities that I didn't comprehend. Turning away from me as he spoke, I leaned in and caressed his shoulder, prompting him to glance at my face again. This stays on topic. What is bothering you so much? I asked. You know I want to help in any way I can. I was still convinced that he was dealing with a complex technological problem, even though I couldn't help much with the technical components of our project. I was willing to contribute to our collaboration. Not only did I provide funds, but I also provided a home for them to reside, as well as a space to develop and test technology. Support is especially vital for focused engineers who are prone to mood fluctuations. Glenn. He paused and thought for a moment, looking at me. He then reached for his tablet controller. I will just show you. His eyes darted as he stated this, and he followed the bizarre comment, reverting to some of his early Indian speech patterns. Please do not blame the messenger. These took up the tablet controller after watching the saved video. At first, I struggled to comprehend what I was witnessing. The motion was fuzzy and choppy. This is where video stabilization comes in, he explained, zooming on the video on the tablet screen as the moving image began to flow seamlessly on the screen. I saw the ground beneath the UAV move across the approximately 9-inch screen. I noted the transition from grass and trees to tarmac and concrete. He appears to have maneuvered the UAV away from fields and forests and toward more densely populated areas. I believe I could post a lesson through your window, but I didn't want to startle you or endanger the UAV. He appeared to smile while saying this. I still didn't comprehend what he was saying. Then I realized what was on the screen. I looked at myself. It was a video of me sitting at my desk at my workplace, talking on my loudspeaker. I only heard the drone of the UAV, road noises and other Sounds typical of a commercial location. Did you take this from outside my office window? I exclaimed. I merely nodded as I continued to watch. I was impressed by the video quality. Of course, I smiled, as I understood that our company would need to pay closer attention to the specifics of our building cleaning and maintenance agreement. The glass through which I saw myself on the video, from the outside, was plainly dusty and in serious need of cleaning. I couldn't help but giggle. Suddenly the image on the screen transformed into a kaleidoscope of pastel and dark colors. The shapes that were previously visible in standard video are now merely sketched. However, the hues were weird. I felt like I was in the center of a weather radar on the Weather Channel. Its infrared was mentioned before I could inquire. Now that I know I'm watching the film in infrared mode, I understand that different colors indicate different heat signatures. The window, which was in direct sunshine, visibly altered what was seen through it, because it had its own heat signature on some days. This is incredible, I exclaimed with a smile. I'm sure the wildlife service guys will have a great time tracking the herds. Samir did not respond to this. He handed back the tablet controller and triggered what appeared to be another video file. He sighed and gave it to me to look at. This time the movie began in infrared mode. Based on the shapes I saw, I determined that the drone was hovering over a parked car, with a driver and a passenger inside. As I watched, human shapes exited the vehicle and walked towards the trunk. Their actions were indistinct, although they could have been removing something from the car trunk. They walked away from the automobile, and I observed that the video's angle had shifted to keep them in view, but the drone's position remained same. I had to dodge the tree they ended up under after pulling the blanket out of the trunk. As Samir began to grow concerned, I realized that his Indian accent had returned. Decide again. As the screen transitioned from infrared to video mode, this allowed me to see if the film was shot in daylight, late morning, or early afternoon, based on the light intensity. Another image I saw was my wife Bella, naked and in Emma Winston's arms. Winston, one of our classmates at school, was a noted womanizer. He was also one of Bella's 3 or 4 previous boyfriends when she and I were compelled to marry due to her pregnancy with Alex. Not surprisingly, I was disappointed to learn the previous year, following Dee's revelation, that Emma Winston had returned to Vancouver after completing his studies at Boy State University and working for several years in Seattle. Furthermore, he now works for the same company as Bella. How fortunate that Emma and Bella's on-screen characters were finally entirely naked, and she was lying on her back on a blanket, with him between her thighs preparing for action. I turned away and cursed. I put my hands in my pockets to avoid hitting anything or anyone out of anger. There was a pause in the video and he held the tablet controller to his chest. I'm so sorry, my pal said. I was just trying out the tracking and hovering features on plainly identifiable persons and items. So I primarily utilized you and your wife to test how well the devices functioned. I didn't realize that when I first started. This fell silent because I stopped listening to him. After 3 minutes of silence in the room, broken only by my angry breathing, I finally spoke. Is this your only video? I asked. They hesitated for a few seconds before saying, I have 3 more entries. But were there more cases? Silence fell again. After half a minute I asked, is it the same every time? I didn't want to know, but it was something to say at the time. After all, my thoughts had already Shifted to the collapse of my marriage? No. Sammy responded according to the other 3 films. And other observations. They spend extended lunch breaks together and visit a peaceful spot near Vancouver. They usually stay in his car. And he just touched the screen to start another video. This video's brightness and contrast were noticeably different, which I reported on. It's because of the rain. Sammy explained. I nodded. Yes. It rained heavily in the Vancouver, Portland area in the spring. I could see why. They wanted to stay in Emma Winston's automobile for their meetings. I recall Winston bragging about his new automobile, which had a massive panoramic sunroof. Some vehicles with this feature have a complete glass roof, while others have many panels. They are all intended to expose the entire cabin to the sun, while also allowing at least a portion of the cabin to receive fresh air. Some people appreciate having wind in their hair. Others choose to sit and observe the stars in the evening. Of course, when it rains, which is common in the Vancouver-Portland area, the panoramic sunroof still allows view, but without getting rain in your face or, in the case of the ladies, in your hair. Winston's car was a Chrysler 300 with all the bells and whistles, including a 2-panel panoramic sunroof, which he enjoyed bragging about. Yes, the ladies like to do it in the comfort of my car, seeing the sun and stars above. I heard this at least twice at work parties that I was obliged to attend with Bella. I didn't hear my wife mention Emma or do anything at these meetings that would raise my suspicions. My wife and her long-term boyfriend appeared to have mastered the art of concealing indicators of adultery, as evidenced by the tablet in front of me, depicting my bitch wife's betrayal. I saw that the heat signatures indicated that they were doing something similar to stripping off garments. In the front seat of the car, they kissed frequently while doing. Finally, I noticed the passenger walk to the back seat where they were having sex. I saw no signs that the driver was attempting to put on a condom, so I believed they were doing it without protection. Not only did my bitch wife cheat on me, but she also jeopardized my health and probably my life by allowing that son of a bitch to have sex without protection, despite his seeming cavalier attitude toward sexual activity. I wouldn't be shocked if he had 1 or more cases of gonorrhea throughout his so-called adult life. Finally, I remarked, I'm going to need copies of these videos, and it appears like I'm about to have a serious chat with my prospective ex-wife about her extramarital activities. I'll also need these films as evidence when I file for custody of my children. These nodded and asked, Are you sure about her background? He fell silent, but I knew what he meant. Are the children really mine? This is something I would need to investigate from a biological standpoint. However, it made little difference in terms of affection. My kids were mine. I didn't care who had conceived the child. I adored Dylan and Dee Dee, and they reciprocated. I would not give them up without a struggle, and even then I wouldn't stop until I had them back. However, this raised a question. Yeah, I believe I need to conduct some DNA testing. And I'm very sorry, my friend D remarked, appearing regretful. I nodded and placed a soothing hand on his shoulder. The video was still playing and I sighed. Hello, Dis, I said, trying to keep my wrath under control, hoping it didn't show in my voice. Do you have any authentic videos? I'm not referring to either of these incidents. His grandfather enthusiastically halted the current video to play another. This video contained another sex scene. This time, Bella having sex with her partner in the back car. This time it was in full standard video mode. And their heads and faces could be seen from behind Winston's automobile, just above the rear edge. It was only a few seconds until the view returned to Hermo, directly over the automobile. I stared at Diz with a question in my eyes. I dropped the drone and zoomed in for a few seconds to capture a clear photo. They answered. I could only keep the drone there for a few seconds, just long enough to get a clean shot before moving out of their sight. I didn't want to notify them to the presence of the drone and camera. You see, Bella is aware of our efforts in this initiative, and she witnessed some of the demonstrations we held in the backyard. If she spotted a drone, she would recognize it right away and assume it was probably taking a photo. When Dis revealed his secret, I had already quit trying to understand what was going on logically. I am currently experiencing various emotional states. I was saddened on a personal level, but I was also concerned about my children. I was mostly angry and fiercely resentful of it, though. I saw in the video that my lovely wife not only cheated on me, but also endangered me by allowing Winston to have intercourse with her without protection. The total scorn and disrespect with which she conducted her affair drove me insane. Yeah. Divorce is one thing, revenge is not the same. I had previously made plans with my lawyer to marry a hawk and had the paper work ready by the time this happened. Vengeance Day. Sounds like the title of an intriguing film, doesn't it? I inquired about the frequency of the cheating couple's noon meetings, and DS confirmed that they always occurred during the long lunch break on Fridays, but occasionally on Tuesdays, the busiest day of the week. I provided a hawk the DVD-R copies of the movies that Samir had previously supplied me, and asked her the questions I needed to find the best approach to serve the papers to my wife in the most painful and humiliating way imaginable. She claimed that she can transfer documents to any place within 20 miles of woods, including the northern outskirts of Vancouver, in an hour, and get them in the recipient's hands within 2 hours. I printed one photo of a loving couple having sex on a blanket beneath the trees. I'll add this frame in the divorce package. The DVD-R containing these videos will only be kept at Marina Hawk's office as a precaution. Meanwhile, I covertly collected swabs and hair samples from both of my children. The first while they slept. The second item is their hairbrush and comb, which are on top of their mirror dressing tables. The results arrived in just a few weeks. I put Marina Hawk's workplace address as the return address, so I was in Marina's small conference room when I realized Dylan was actually my son. Oh gee, I believe Father and Mr. Swinford were correct in pushing me to marry Bella. At the time my hand shook slightly as I reviewed the second batch of findings. DNA was not mine, so biologically she will always be mine if I can keep her. I loved my darling girl too much to lose her to the antics my soon-to-be ex-wife would undoubtedly undertake. The second set of results hardened my heart even further. Obviously this was not the first time she had spread her legs for another man while married to me. That apartment, which was meant to be mine alone, seemed to serve as a bus station for her numerous boyfriends, allowing them to arrive and depart as soon as she could arrange, out of schedule, without informing me. The day of vengeance had to be carefully selected based on the weather forecast for the chosen Friday. In fact, it took days and another 4 weeks of patiently waiting and building to our movie library before the appropriate day loomed on the horizon. It was now May, and the weather forecast for the upcoming Friday was not only mostly bright, but also with an extremely low humidity level of 15% sure if the pair does not get out of the car, they will most likely do so in the rear seat, with the panoramic sunroof open. Everything relied on the weather. But Days and I were prepared to act whatever. Chris, are you certain about this? I mean, it's absolutely terrible. These people protested because we were filling the bucket in front of us with one of the unique weather balloons I got at the military store. We designed the drone's bombing capacity, which became known as the Enola Gay. Samir installed a fuse using compressed carbon dioxide, and we filled one of the weather balloons with water. Samir carefully placed the fuse inside the filled balloon before I sealed it, leaving the fuse cable outside. We wrapped fabric tape around the seal many times and formed a loop from it. A remotely actuated pizza delivery person will hold this loop on the underbelly of the Elena drone. When the ball falls far enough to draw the fuse cable, simply touch the tablet controller screen to release the weight. On command, it will go off, causing the ball to explode in a quick, watery explosion. I insisted on 3 test runs using water balloons in my backyard. The last 2 practices included moving alternating strobes, the one we now call after the well-known film with a lot of flashing lights on the spaceship that delivered and picked up the protagonist. You may be confident that I am certain of it. In answer to Des's, I stated, I want them in the shit, literally. With these comments, I proceeded to fill the ball with a horrible mixture of urine and crap. The idea came to me while I was driving about, feeling sorry for myself, and pulled into a little parking lot maintained by the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. The rudimentary site, although remaining green and undisturbed as conservationists want, appears to have had an equally primitive toilet rather than the chemical one found at most more recent sites. Then I smiled heavily, as an idea sprang to mind for how I could wreak revenge. I made sure to wear medical gloves when filling the balloon like this. We had a pail of bleach and water mixed with disinfectant beside us. When we finished filling the balloon, we wanted to tightly seal it and hang it on a hook in the garage while we put our hands in the cleaning solution. It would be unfortunate if it were. And I, in the process of exacting revenge on the cheats, I caught hepatitis or something equally as awful. We also wanted to avoid overfilling the balloon. Previous water balloons were substantially larger to allow for a safety margin in terms of payload, weight and volume. During the actual operation, all I had to do was wait approximately an hour for Emma, Winston and my wife, Bella, to leave work for their monthly Friday afternoon sex rendezvous. I went to my tablet controller and started the engine 10 minutes before the traders Oliverly leave the building after about 30 seconds of warming up. I took up the app from its cover in a grove of trees across the parking lot from my wife's workplace. I practiced with the camera attached to the app using a gimbal and became proficient at altering the orientation of the camera as the platform moved. I left the Ben in hover mode, practicing controlling camera movement and zooming to ensure the mount did not jam at the wrong time. I wanted to make sure I got all of the extremely embarrassing activity. I couldn't believe I was more than 13 miles from where it was watching my wife's workplace. Alibi still would. Sure enough, Bella and Emma strolled out the door into the parking lot. Together and on time. They didn't even appear to care what their co-workers thought. Which may explain the poor fool glances I've received from some of my wife's co-workers at recent work gatherings. Okay, we know where they're heading. Let us load up Elena. I told my pal these remarks as we carefully pulled the fill balloon from the rack in the garage. It was frightening when I almost dropped it. But we came to a halt, reduced the pulse to around 600, and pushed the ball to the location where Enola Gay standing. I let Samir handle the situation. He was a specialist at mounting the fuse and suspension system to support the load. I returned to the monitoring and adjusted it to the correct place. Emmy's fast-moving Chrysler as seen from above. Boring yet. The enthusiasm of what we were doing kept us alert and focused. The trek to Dana and Emma's favorite parking location, Oliverly, takes approximately 10 minutes. And today was no exception. Dis laughed gently and responded, "Yeah," quietly. I asked him what he meant. He chuckled and asked, "Look at the hatch." As I turned and zoomed in to get a better perspective, I noticed Winston had opened the panoramic sunroof of his luxury car so they could enjoy the spring air while driving. I prayed to myself that they'd keep it open. It had rained the night before, so the ground was really damp. Today, however, the weather was beautiful, with temperatures hovering about 60 degrees and largely sunny skies, and the humidity having momentarily subsided. The conditions couldn't have been better for our needs. Of course, as soon as the automobile came to a stop, the couple got out and discovered that the ground beneath the trees was too wet for sex. They exchanged passionate kisses and began to undress each other. We watched from a place among the adjacent woods as they undressed without embarrassment, right in the open air. They then leaned into the car and placed stuff in the front passenger seat, kissing and touching each other as they removed each item of clothes. Damn that! I believed she was still a lovely woman, despite her flaws. I noted in passing that Emma Winston's equipment fell into the Goldilocks category. Not too big and not too little. Just observed, without thinking about it. I watched, gritting my teeth, as my wife of nearly 15 years opened the car's back passenger door and hopped inside, preparing for sex. I maintained the Ben in hover mode to the side, out of their line of sight, and instructed them to commence their maneuver. From this point forward, I slowly and carefully maneuvered the 8 to a position below the line of sight and below the curvature of the car's trunk, where the cheaters were now having sex. I almost wondered when I heard Samir's warning. Okay, he was almost shouting. He came to his wits and stated, "Final approach strobe and signal in 3 to 1. Then in a quiet voice, slightly louder than a whisper, he, "Now." I lifted it to the level of the back window. I caught a glimpse of a couple having sex in the back seat, and their faces were thrilled. I activated the strobe lights first, followed by the police alarm. As soon as the brilliant flashing lights appeared, I covered the strobes with dark blue film. I chuckled slightly as I considered what the pair must have been thinking. The lights resembled those on the roof of a police cruiser. Woo-woo. This sound is nearly commonly known in the United States as a police car horn. As anticipated, the couple paused and stood still for a few seconds. Their shocked reactions were caught for posterity on a video broadcast. I laughed at their distress and congratulated myself on startling them. So much that I almost missed Ortiz's bombs away. I have to admit that I wasn't anticipating anything as awful as what the video depicted. The movement inside the car, behind the pair in my vision, appeared to be something falling through the hatch. But it only lasted a moment before the rear glass, with the exception of the couple's heads and shoulders, was covered in a horrible brown film. It took the couple a few seconds to realize they were suddenly enveloped in a brown haze of pee and mushy crap, similar to the interior of Emma Winston's treasured luxury Chrysler 300. They were looking out the back window when this gadget exploded, leaving their faces only partially covered by dripping from the car's ceiling. This was conceived while Dis and I were developing the attack. I had to make sure they were facing away from the fuse to avoid getting excrement blown into their eyes. We didn't want to blind them or pierce their nose or mouth. We also did not want them to swallow anything after all. It is one thing to tell someone to consume garbage and perish. It's another thing entirely to comprehend that if they eat even a small amount of trash, they could become seriously ill and die. I wanted to get back at them, rather than worrying about being accused of murder. Mission completed, they remarked in a startling authoritative tone. Then more gently he said, "I believe it is time to wind down, my friend." With that, we directed in Oligay and moved away from the scene, keeping them at low levels. We brought them home in 20 minutes and celebrated with arms around each other and a black Budweiser crown. Days passed on my instructions, leaving me at home to await Bella's humiliating return. I reactivated the AITA to monitor the main roadway that leads into our region, and immediately returned it to the garage. When I saw the Chrysler exit the highway, I immediately notified Myrna Hawke to have a courier in the vicinity and be prepared to act within 10 minutes. She provided me his phone number, which I saved to inform him. When I saw Bella's car pull up to our house, my car was parked a few homes down from ours, so Bella had no idea I was home. I must confess that Winston's car was stunning, at least on the outside. When he put it in park, I still noticed brown streaks on the inside of the windshield. I believe he used his tank top or whatever to clean it up enough to drive. When the passenger door opened, I noticed a pitiful figure. Bella's face was free of the foul stuff that had clearly infiltrated the entire interior of Emma's car, even all of the garments they had heaped into the front passenger footrest while having business in the rear seat. I knew this because I saw the Elena movie, as Dis and I were drinking our post-flight drinks. Pieces the accuracy was exceptional. The ball of excrement entered the car immediately via the open panoramic sunroof, and the detonator exploded. It is disgusting contents, a few inches above the center console, between the front seats. The camera on the Enola Gay filmed a brown explosion effect that spread quickly over the entire car, including the footmat where their garments were folded. A small number escaped from the hatch as a result of the IED's focused fuse. The guy was quite excellent at this. I watched as another black car drew up to the curb, and the driver stepped out and walked towards my porch. He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, and was holding a large manila envelope. He walked rapidly across the yard, catching up with Bella before she got to the porch. I slightly opened the living room window, allowing sound to go both inside and outdoors. He got near to Bella and started his formal speech. "Bella." I couldn't help laughing. He began again, attempting to talk, and breathe through his mouth simultaneously. "Bella Taylor?" he inquired, sounding as if he were attempting to breathe through his mouth while speaking. "Humans. This must be an awful scent." Yes, but I can't discuss right now. She responded, attempting to get rid of him. Bless his heart. He went ahead and just remarked, "Here." I peeked out the window and watched Bella accept the envelope he handed her. I believe it was a reflex reaction. He hurriedly walked to his car and stated as he returned, "Bella Taylor, you've received a summons." He took a photo of her with his phone, while still stepping back to capture the occurrence, as well as the date and time of serving of the summons. Winston wished to depart quickly. Apparently, he wanted to get away from his previous mistress, take a shower and hire a cleaner. The fortitude to clean his car, or an arsonist who would simply set fire to it, putting it out of its suffering, and moving on with life. Looking forward to the weekend. It took him a few minutes to exit my parking lot, because the delivery driver's vehicle was partially obstructing him. The courier took out another envelope and approached Emma, Winston's car's driver's side window. I didn't hear it, but it appeared like the delivery person had validated Emma's identity and tossed the envelope out the window. Stepped back to take a photo before driving away. Apparently the odor was as terrible around the automobile as it was around Bella. I walked aside from the window so Bella would not notice me. I'm watching the events unfold in my front yard. I overheard her son. I'm not sure if it was the son of wrath, melancholy, self-pity, or a combination of the three. I overheard a couple more after that. She tried to use her key and discovered that it was no longer working. This morning, I used the chance to change the locks and replace the garage door remote before the retribution operation began. She wasn't sure if I was home, but she rang the doorbell and listened. She banged on the door numerous times before kicking at once. Then I heard a sound that indicated she had come down onto the porch and sat down near the door. Some time is gone. Then I felt my cell phone vibrating in my pocket. I turned off the ringer so she would not notice my presence in the house. I entered the kitchen before answering the phone. What? When I saw her phone number on the screen, I would usually say something nice like, "Hello, darling." Not this time. "Glenn, dear, something bad happened to me." She burst into a loud, sorrowful cry. I kept in touch till she calmed down after a minute. "Glenn, I can't get into the house. My key isn't working. And I really need to shower and cleanse." I almost laughed as I imagined her sitting on the porch, crying, her shit-soaked garments chafing her flesh. I finally spoke. "Bella, did you get the package I sent?" "Yes." "Yes," she responded. "What's this? The nasty man who handed it to me claimed that I had received a summons. What exactly did he mean?" I could not believe she hadn't figured it out. "So I suppose you should open it up and discover exactly what he meant." I admitted that I couldn't resist responding in a nasty tone. I heard her shredding the envelope, most likely clutching it to her neck and chin. "Chris, why are you suddenly angry?" No, I instructed Myrna Hawk to ensure that the first item in the divorce packet was a photograph of Bella and Emma having sex on a blanket on the ground. The angle at which the photo was taken suggested that the tall man with the camera had taken it from around 30 feet away using a zoom lens. Only a few of us will know the secret behind drone video. Unlike what most people predicted, the divorce went well. For me, a timed and dated snapshot of the cheats could have been helpful. I'm not sure, because Washington state does not need blame in divorce or a time of separation. Before divorce, the process was relatively quick. I acquired the house because it was in my name, but I had to give Bella with a large Amount of monetary assets. This includes at least 2 years of child support. Because she was still working. Because the house was mine. The court ruled that it is in the children's best interests to preserve the pattern of interaction, changing only what is necessary, owing to changes in the parents' relationship, or as needed to keep the child safe from physical, mental or emotional harm. Simply, this meant that the children should stay in the house with me, so as not to disrupt their typical interaction routine. To Bella's credit, she did not attempt to paint me as physically, mentally or emotionally abusive. If she did, I would supply Myrna Hawke with a list of witnesses who could attest that I was not abusive. I was unable to entirely liberate Alex and Dee Dee from Bella's influence, since the court ordered joint decision-making, which allowed Bella to remain involved in the children's life. Well, considering how the courts tend to erode fathers' rights, and the fact that I haven't been entirely squeezed, I suppose I could allow Bella some leeway without much complaint. Of course, I wished I didn't have to interact with my ex-wife at all, but I still had children to take care of. Until now, I've shielded children from the reality of betrayal that ended our marriage. I intend to keep them in the dark for as long as possible. Bella rented an apartment only a few miles away. Guess who had to pay for it? She was closer to Vancouver and her place of employment. What particularly irritated me was the requirement that she pay for her cable TV connection. I didn't care whether Bella was dating or trying to form another relationship. This issue was never raised during the regular visitation of children, and I did not inquire in general. I struggled financially for about 6 months before payments began to arrive from the business Diaz and I were doing with his cousins in India. Surprisingly, we did not have to produce anything. We only needed to be the masterminds and intermediaries in the transactions that led to the production, special configuration and transportation of structures. We had to hire another attorney to handle the export issues, because our products were still not legal for commercial use in the United States. And technology exports were subject to trade restrictions. But God, once the federal government gives us the go-ahead here in the United States, the sky is literally the limit. I finally received some financial relief when the court ruled in my favor on my intentional infliction of emotional distress claim against Emma Winston. It turned out that the guy had a lot of debt, and his final payment to me, after attorney fees and other expenses, was only $43,000. Okay. In the meantime, I was still making good money. My daytime job life started to improve. A few months following the divorce, I believe I began to miss my intimate life a little. I laughed when I learned that Emma Winston's insurance agent refused to declare the car a total loss, instead insisting on a thorough cleaning and return to service. Emma and I both knew he couldn't get rid of the shit smell in his upholstery. Emma maintained that police were on the scene when the hoodlums damaged his car. He claimed that the police car incident camera should have captured some evidence to back up his story. Calls to the State Patrol and the Clark and Cowlitz County Sheriff's Departments for the name of an officer or deputy who might be present produced no results. Days and I remained silent about the shit bombing incident. We didn't really do anything to arouse suspicion until Bella saw our little show tonight at Dad's party and connected the dots. I went to bed after we got our friend home. Alex went to his room and probably browsed the internet before going to bed. Did you Enjoy your 12th birthday, baby? I inquired as Dee Dee covered herself with the blanket. It will probably be a few months before. I am no longer invited into her room for bedtime. She's clearly maturing before my eyes. Papa, she said quietly, feigning irritation. I'm not your baby. She then giggled. I could not help myself. I started crying quietly. She saw my tears and said, Dad, I did not mean to. I simply meant honey, I said as I gathered her into my arms for a hug. Blanket included. You'll always be my baby. She hugged me back and said, I understand, Dad. I understand. I kissed her forehead. And as she lay back down, I looked into her eyes and told her, Dee, you're just so special. She smiled and closed her eyes. The DNA results, proving that I am not the father of this little girl, will never be made public. If I can help it. I couldn't be sure. But given Bella's insistence on being named, there was a good chance. Emma Winston had impregnated her during one of his school and boy visits. All those years ago. Bella could be secretly laughing at me. I don't think she told Winston, despite knowing he was Dee Dee's biological father. Otherwise she'd have to answer questions about her previous relationships. And this would most likely come up if he attempted to fight my lawsuit against him. It didn't matter anymore. My children were with me, and my cheating ex-wife had left the house. I went downstairs and checked my watch. It was only 9:10. After 9 p.m. I usually don't answer the phone and instead leave messages for the answering machine. I've always thought it was impolite to call my home after 9 p.m. unless there was an emergency. For some reason, I decided to answer the phone this evening. When it rang at 9:15, I was surprised and relieved to hear a voice on the other end. Mia's voice spoke into my phone with apparent amusement. Okay, Chris, can you tell me what that vicious punch from your ex was about? Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.